Have you ever heard a song so old that it feels like it belongs to another world? But somehow it touches your soul, like it was written for you? Tonight, you're not just listening to music, you're listening to memories, to a life that was once lived and almost lost forever. This is the story of Kenji, 97, and Sayuri, the only one left who still remembers the boy he once was. 80 years ago, they were just students in Hiroshima. Two young men daydreaming with instruments, composing music together. He played the violin, she played the piano, and they were composing a piece of music. Simple, gentle, full of hope. He meant to tell her that he loved her. But before he could find the words, the sky disappeared. August 6th, 1945. No sound, no warning. There was only a flash of white light. When Kenji woke up, he was buried under the rubble. His hand was burned. His violin was destroyed. His left eye was blind. And Sayuri was gone. He thought she was dead. And perhaps in a way, a part of him was dead too. For 70 years, he never married, never played music again. Because every note reminded him of what he had lost. Her smile, their song, the goodbye that was never said. Then one day, a letter arrived. From a group of survivors, there was a name, Sayuri Mori. She had lived, hurt, alone. She had thought he was dead too. They met again after 7 decades. Two old souls sat on a bench. Not a word, just silence and tears. He asked her, "Do you remember that song?" She said, "I never forget." And so they played, with trembling fingers, with broken voices, but with hearts that remembered every note. The music they played was not a performance. It was a lullaby for the lost, a prayer for peace, a final love letter between two children who were never allowed to say goodbye. Because some music is not made of notes. It's made of memories, of wounds, of waiting, of wonder. Don't just listen. Feel it. Let it remind you that love may be interrupted, but it never goes away. And sometimes, even after 80 years, a song still finds its way home.
Your Part 1. A Melody of Memory. Have you ever heard a song and suddenly you're no longer where you were? Maybe you've been back to your childhood home, listening to your mother humming in the kitchen, or standing in the rain with someone you loved right before they left. Music has a strange magic, doesn't it? It doesn't just move through time, it carries time. Tonight, I want to share with you a song, but it's not just music, it's a memory. A living, breathing fragment of the past that never quite heals. His name is Kenji. He's 97 years old. His hands are weak now, his eyes are cloudy, but his memory, it's sharp, carved by both love and loss. And beside him was Sayuri, a woman of the same age, whose quiet eyes still held the gentleness of someone who had loved deeply and lost even more deeply. They were the last two people left from a story that had almost been forgotten. The only ones who remembered not only what had happened, but who they were before it happened. Kenji didn't introduce himself proudly. He didn't need to. He said softly, "My name is Kenji. I'm 97 years old, and this is Sayuri, the only person alive who remembers the boy I used to be." That statement alone was enough to silence the room. Because when you're 97, every memory you tell is a miracle, a testament to survival, to hold on to. They sat at a dusty piano, not to perform, not to impress, but to remember. Let the past breathe, just for a moment. The music they play is unpolished, their hands shake, the notes wander. But it doesn't matter, because what they're playing isn't a performance. It's a conversation between two hearts torn apart by war and reunited by time. And Kenji says, what we're going to play isn't music. It's a voice from the past. Which makes you wonder, what sounds are hidden in your own past? What songs have you buried so deep that you've forgotten the melody? Kenji and Sayuri haven't forgotten. They're about to let the melody speak. So before we begin, pause. Let go of the noise around you. Let this story unfold slowly. Because it's not just a piece of music. That's the sound of love. When it's been waiting 80 years to be heard. Part 2. Hiroshima, 1945. A love interrupted. Imagine being 18 years old, full of fire and fearlessness, with your whole life ahead of you and one person beside you who makes everything feel possible. That was Kenji. He was a young violinist. Sayuri played piano. They were students, dreamers, collaborators, and maybe something more. They spent their mornings in a quiet room at the edge of Hiroshima, working on a song they were writing together. Not for school, not for anyone, just for them. It was gentle, simple, hopeful. The kind of song you write when you still believe the world is kind. And Kenji, he was trying to find the right words, not for the music, but to tell her he loved her. But before he ever got the chance, before the words could leave his mouth, the sky opened. August 6th, 1945. There was no warning, no siren, just a flash, brighter than anything he had ever seen. And then, silence. When Kenji woke up, he was buried beneath what used to be his classroom. His hands were burned, his left eye no longer saw. His violin case was crushed like dry leaves, and Sayuri was nowhere. He called out, nothing. He waited, still nothing. That's the kind of silence that doesn't leave you. Even when the noise comes back, a part of you stays in that moment. Kenji survived, but he stopped playing music. For 70 years, he never touched a violin again, because every note was a reminder of the life he didn't get to live, of the girl he never got to love, of the song they never finished. And that melody, the one they had started together, became something different. Not a song anymore, but a wound that never fully closed. And I wonder, how many of us carry songs like that? Songs that were never finished, words we never said, goodbyes that never came. Because life, or war, or fear, interrupted them. Kenji's silence wasn't just grief. It was respect. It was mourning. It was the sound of a love interrupted by history. But history, as we'll soon see, sometimes has a second verse. Part 3, Reunion. After 70 years, a song reborn. What would you do if someone you thought was lost forever suddenly reached out? Not in a dream, not in a memory, but in a letter. 70 years after the world changed, Kenji received one. It came from a survivors group in Japan. Inside was a name he had whispered only in his dreams. Sayuri Mori. She was alive. Kenji held that letter for hours before opening it, and when he finally did, he cried for 3 days. Not because he was sad, but because hope, real, impossible hope, had returned. They arranged to meet, not in some dramatic way. No big reunion scene, just two people. Two souls who had been through fire and silence, sitting quietly on a park bench. Kenji didn't know what to say. Sayuri didn't either. And sometimes words aren't needed. There's a kind of silence that says everything. She had scars down her back, burns from that day. She had lost her family. her little brother. She had thought Kenji had died under the rubble. They looked at each other, not as strangers, but as the only two left who remembered the unfinished song. He asked her, "Do you remember it?" And she said, being without pause, "I never forgot." You know, memory is strange. It fades in some places and holds like stone in others. The brain forgets dates, names, passwords. But somehow the heart holds on to melodies, especially the ones tied to love. That song had never left her. She had hummed it in the quiet, held it like a prayer, even when she thought the person she wrote it with was gone forever. And now, all these years later, with hands that shook and voices grown soft, they remembered it together. Not perfectly, not professionally, but truthfully. What they played wasn't just a song. It was a resurrection of youth, of love, of what war had tried to destroy, but failed to erase. Because sometimes what's broken doesn't disappear. It waits. And if you're lucky, if you're very, very lucky, it finds its way back to you. Part 4, the final performance, a goodbye. Never said their hands shook, not from fear, but from age. Time had taken their strength, their speed, their precision, but not the memory. Kenji and Sayuri sat together one last time. The piano was old, the room small, but in that space, something sacred stirred. They weren't playing to impress anyone. They weren't seeking applause. This wasn't performance. This was remembrance. This was healing. Kenji looked at the small group gathered that night and said softly, "The song you're about to hear is the one we were meant to play 80 years ago." And then they began. The melody wasn't perfect. Some notes trembled, some faded, but none of that mattered, because every sound was soaked in memory. Every pause held more than silence. It held decades of love and loss. They played for the people they had lost, for the lives they never lived, for the younger versions of themselves, two children who never got to say goodbye. The music floated gently, like a lullaby whispered across time. A lullaby for the broken, a prayer for peace, a final love letter that had waited too long to be delivered. And as the last note hung in the air, you could almost hear the world exhale, as if it too had been holding its breath for 80 years. Because sometimes a song doesn't need to be finished to be complete. It just needs to be heard.
If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and share so everyone can learn together. Thank you.